if in fact there was a nuclear agreement, is it likely to lead to more cooperation in terms of U.S.-Iranian relations, U.S.-Iranian cooperation, U.S.-Iranian joint efforts if it finds itself on the same side?
Well,
and do you somehow make the argument that if we can get past this nuclear agreement, we can work together to defeat our common enemy, in this case, ISIL, which is also the common enemy of your competitors in the region, the Saudis, for example?
well, I see a possibility for regional cooperation, which exists even now, on dealing with all these issues. I believe the United States needs to make a very serious assessment of how policies that were based on a paradigm that from our perspective is outdated, does not work for this time in world history. This is a bit maybe philosophical, and I've had 6 years of being philosophical when I was out of government.
Yes.
But you got to look at it this way, that in a globalized world, zero-sum games, that is, you trying to impose a cost on somebody you don't consider to be friendly, does not work. We have common enemies. We have common challenges. We need to work for this so-called win-win situations where everybody makes a gain. You cannot gain security at the expense of insecurity of others. It must have become clear. I believe the United States is moving in that direction. I hope hasn't made that decision. It's still, I mean, if you look at the nuclear issue, the United States, some at least in the United States, including those you mentioned, and the op-eds that they have written, they consider their gain to be our loss, and our loss, and our gain to be their loss. I think this is fundamentally flawed.
Okay, but do you think the same thing? Do you view an American loss as a win for Iran?
Not necessarily.
So you're saying
not necessarily. Not necessarily. I do not
we
believe...
look at a zero-sum game,
I do not
but
believe,
you don't.
I do not believe that in a globalized world, anybody with any rationality can look at the international situation as a zero-sum game. It is not zero-sum. Unfortunately, many people do.
Does your government see the United States as the great Satan?
Well,
a phrase that's been used by ayatollahs.
Well, our people consider...
Not your people.
No. Our people. The government in Iran follows the people. It's not the other way around. Our people, if you look at the polls, the polls that were even conducted by American polling establishments, including Pew, a lot of polls indicate that the Iranian people are skeptical of U.S. intentions, even when it comes to nuclear negotiations. Yeah. I believe the United States needs to convince the Iranians that it does not harbor ill intentions against the Iranian people. It's the people who count.
And the Iranian government needs to convince the American people that it does not want nuclear weapons, which would lead to a proliferation of weapons in the Middle East, in your region of the Gulf. You need to convince the American people of that, because that's what they fear. They fear that if Iran gets nuclear, it's not that they're going to attack somebody, it's just that everybody is going to all of a sudden have nuclear weapons. The Saudis will reach out to the Pakistanis, and everybody else will want nuclear weapons, and
I think as several...
Is that a real possibility?
I think as several secretaries of state wrote in the Wall Street Journal, yes, I believe, some time ago, it is time for everybody to think of a world without nuclear weapons, because that's the ultimate answer.
So why not?
No, hold on. Because you got to make yourself accountable to the same criteria that you want the rest of the world to be accountable to. And the United States, which has used nuclear weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it does not have the authority to advise others on what to do and what not to do. But we have made our own decision. We believe that nuclear weapons did not provide security for anybody. They will not provide security for anybody. We have made a very solid solid determination that nuclear weapons run counter to our Islamic values.
I understand. Hatmi said that to me. Ahmadinejad said that to me. Rouhani said that to me in one-on-one conversation.
Sure.
All of them. We
Sure.
don't want nuclear weapons.
Sure.
Why do you think the world doesn't trust you?
Well, because lies have been spread of all people by the Israelis, who are the only ones in our region who possess nuclear weapons, the only ones who are not a member of the NPT in our region. We want, actually yesterday I was talking to the Egyptian foreign minister, we all want to establish a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. Why don't you push Israel to accept this? Because tomorrow, if you have everybody in the Middle East accepting, and everybody is there, ready to accept no nuclear weapons in the Middle East, with all the inspections you want in the world, that we will not have nuclear weapons. So it's not, I mean, Netanyahu does not have any authority to become sort of non-proliferation guru of the world. This guy sits on 200 nuclear warheads, which are illegal, have been developed in contravention of every international norm and treaty on non-proliferation. So let's be serious. You want to be serious? Iran never wanted nuclear weapons, never wants nuclear weapons.
Granted the point that you're making about Israel, they do have nuclear weapons. They did not sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and everybody is aware of that fact.
So why don't you deal with that fact? That's the fact. I mean, what is said about Iran are allegations.
Okay.
This is the fact on the ground, and I don't see anybody. Iran did not invade any of its neighbors. Israel, every 2 years, invades Gaza. Every other year takes an operation.
But I don't want to go off into that, only because...
I know you don't.
Well, no, it's not because of the reason you think. It's because you get into the question of who provoked who and all of that, as you know. And it looks to me like your friends, Hamas, has survived this, and some will argue, and they will argue, that they survived that war and they came out stronger in some cases.
Usually people who resist aggression came out stronger.
So let me ask some basic questions that a lot of people want to know. One is that, why don't you want to provide? This is a simple thing to do. The history that John Kerry and others have asked you to provide so that they would have a basis to look at. They'd know more about what you had done and have a basis to make an evaluation about the future. You refused to include that.
No, we didn't.
You have not allowed a history of your...
No. Come on. Hold on. Let's take one step at a time. You make somebody makes an allegation against you. It's up to them to prove it, not for you to disprove it. Allegations have been made against Iran one after the other. Iran has been inspected in the last 10 years more than any other country in the world, save for Japan. The only country that has been inspected more than Iran, based on IAEA report, I'm referring not to the IAEA report recently, based on the 2013 IAEA report. IAEA spent more money on Iran than any other country other than Japan.
And do you recognize that the IAEA says that there are unanswered questions?
There are
They have at least 10 basic unanswered
12.
questions. 12. Okay.
So these are the questions.
Unanswered questions.
Yes, my friend.
And if you want to prove your point,
Did you ask
answer their questions.
Did you ask the IAEA when they got the questions? They got the questions based on allegations that Israel provided to them. Now, if people who are themselves violating the NPT continue to accuse others who have a track record of complying with their obligations under the NPT with allegations. Now, what we can do, and we have been trying with the IAEA, is to develop a framework for us to answer those questions, but it has to be clear that proving the negative is impossible. You know that. Any lawyer will tell you that it is impossible to prove a negative. Somebody who makes an allegation, who presents an allegation, must provide the evidence for that. The problem is the IAEA has been searching Iran for the last 10 years, has spent more time in Iran than any other...
You've got nothing to hide. Let them come in. Let them do whatever they want to, because you're saying we have nothing to hide. Yes, we have centrifuges we want to use for peaceful purposes. We got nothing to hide. So I say to you, inspection is a big deal for trust and verification, or non-trust and verification, whatever you want to define it as. It's a big deal. for the Americans.
If there is a deal,
and for the IAEA.
sure, if there is a deal,
Yeah.
Iran will accept the highest international level of inspections. That is the additional protocol.
How about go anywhere, anytime?
Come on, go anywhere, anytime. You're talking about sovereign countries. There are international standards. Go anywhere, anytime, where? Which country is prepared to give you go anywhere, anytime? All countries have industrial secrets, have military secrets, but if there are bases, and there is an international criteria, people come up with these hysteric arguments. We have an international set of measures, internationally agreed, being implemented in a lot of countries, and Iran has said that if there is an agreement, that if we choose the path of cooperation instead of the path of confrontation, because you cannot choose the path of confrontation and expect the other side to cooperate. I mean, it's either or.
Yeah.
You cannot have
We're
them.
trying to get trust here.
Okay, we're trying to go in
And
the
verification.
direction of
And
building.
verification.
Okay, fine. Verification and trust. That requires you to accept certain norms, certain international practices that are now agreed upon and available to all countries. Iran is prepared to accept the highest level of international inspection
and
that is available.
Do you believe these are the most extensive, intrusive inspections that you've ever been subjected to? Those that are encapsulated in this agreement?
Iran is accepting to implement the additional protocol. And the additional protocol is the highest standard of inspection that is available in the world. So he's not lying. If Iran implements the additional protocol, Iran would be implementing the highest standard of inspection. But that is not exclusive to Iran. That is the standard of inspection that that some other countries, not all other countries, are implementing. But let me tell you something. Iran was prepared to implement that in 2003. Actually,
why did everything fail in 2003?
Actually, we implemented the additional protocol from 2003 to 2005. The United States government at that time, unfortunately, chose the path of confrontation and torpedoed the possibilities for cooperation. And the same people who killed the opportunity for cooperation then are advising now to kill this opportunity.
They really worry most of all, not how many centrifuges you have. What they really worry about is that you can secretly have a facility like you did last time and were forced to disclose.
No, here, again.
That's what they worried about.
Charlie.
They are worried about a covert facility that they can't know about and don't have access to.
Charlie, let's look at the realities on the ground. What happened to Iran was a pattern of denial. Iran owns a part of a French consortium producing enriched uranium, 10% of Eurodif. We haven't been able to get a gram of uranium from them. You know that the United States in the 1950s and 60s, in the Atoms for Peace project, built a nuclear research reactor in Tehran. Then, after the revolution, we started to need fuel for that reactor. The United States refused to give us fuel for the reactor that it had built. It's a peaceful reactor. It cannot produce weapons, but the United States refused to give us fuel. We went and bought it in 1990 from Argentina. Then, in early 2000s, we needed more fuel. That fuel ran out. We asked for fuel from the IAEA. They said, we don't give it to you. We said, we will build it ourselves. And then they started to panic. Why is Iran building its own fuel? Why? Because you didn't give it to us. You see, Iranian people, we have the scientific base. We have the scientific capability. We have the technological capability. People cannot wish that technological capability away. It's there on the ground. What we are prepared to do is to ensure that that scientific and technological capability is used exclusively for peaceful purposes. That's what we're interested in. But you cannot, again, start history at the point that you wanted to start. You got to start history when the United States government went across the world trying to deny Iran of the fuel to run our reactor. Now we're testing another option, an option that we always preferred. We preferred that option in early 2000s.
You mentioned that.
When we made suggestions.
Right.
No, I want you to understand, and I want the American public to understand, that it's not the sanctions that has brought Iran here. We were always at the negotiating table. We were always prepared to reach a negotiated solution. It was unfortunately segments of the United States administration who believed, and unfortunately continue to believe, that they can impose their views on the rest of the world. They can't. And the sooner they realize that, the better we all will be.
Let me talk about the breakout period for a second. What is the breakout period?
Breakout is a hype.
Okay, let me walk through it then. Most people think the breakout period is the time if you did everything you needed to do. If you broke off inspections, it's how long it would take you to get to one nuclear weapon. Let me finish.
Please do.
The conventional wisdom is 2 to 3 months. The Americans have expressed some preference, and that it be a year, and that extension from 2 to 3 months to a year lasts for 10 years. What's wrong with that?
For the past 8 years, Iran has suffered all these sanctions, and we had enough material to build 8 bombs.
8 bombs?
8 bombs, and we never did.
So how much material is that?
8,000 kilograms.
You have 8,000 kilograms
8,000 kilograms
of enriched
uranium. During President Ahmadinejad's time, where the United States and the rest of the world put all the pressure on him, demonized him, tried to create a security threat out of a country that never posed a threat against anybody. 8 years, 8,000 kilograms, 8 bombs. Not a single bomb. Nobody even contests this argument. So,
well, let me try.
Breakout is a hysteria, is a hype.
May I make one point?
Please.
If it's that simple, why don't you ship that enriched uranium that you can make a bomb out of the country? Ship it to Russia, for example.
Well, I'm not negotiating with you, but that's a part of the deal.
But I thought it had been pulled back.
No, it hasn't been pulled back. It's a part of the deal. Not what we do with that is something that we have already agreed upon.
So you'll ship all that?
What we do with that, I mean, you will see when the agreement comes out what we will do with that, but we will address that issue. That I can tell you right now. When the deal is out, if there is a deal, when the deal is out, you will see what we do with that. But we are prepared. First of all, you have to take that into consideration, that for 8 years, during a time when we had confrontation, we were sitting on what this hype considers 8 bombs, and we never did build a bomb because we believe bombs do not create security for anybody.
Is that the only reason?
That's the only reason.
That's
the only reason. If Iran had the intention of building a bomb, nobody could have prevented us from doing that. But we didn't. We haven't gone in that direction because, unlike people who used nuclear bombs, and I'm sorry to use this, against innocent people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we do not believe that any moral argument can justify the use of nuclear weapons. None whatsoever. I went before the International Court of Justice in 1996 and spoke for 90 minutes arguing that no, under no circumstances is it legal to use a nuclear weapon. Under all circumstances, using nuclear weapons is illegal, immoral, unjustified, and most important of all, will not provide any security for anybody. This is our conviction. And that is why we didn't build the bomb. And that is why we won't build a bomb in the future.
Then
this you can take to the bank.
Then why don't you do everything that humanly possible to convince the world, and specifically the P5+1 countries, to say to them, we so passionately believe that nuclear weapons are awful, and we don't want them, and we will do everything that you need and more to convince you of that, rather than arguing over every little point, rather than refusing to answer some questions, rather than doing all that stuff,
no, you see,
which contributes to the disbelief.
We're not in a court. And nobody has been given the role of a prosecutor.
No, and
this is not mutual.
And you understand, I'm not trying to prosecute here. Yeah. What I'm trying to do is figure out where you are.
No. I'm talking about the negotiations with P5+1. Right. You and I are old friends. Yeah, we can talk freely.
Exactly.
What's the point here is that this is a negotiation between sovereign states. This is not one side demanding something from the other. We have a compounded mutual mistrust between these two, particularly Iran and the United States. And the rest are just there, some of them with concerns, some of them with concerns similar to ours. Some are concerned about sanctions. Most people believe that the United States sanctions are illegal. Illegal. So what we are doing is that we are negotiating the terms of an agreement, not an instrument of surrender by anybody. We don't want the United States to surrender. The United States cannot expect Iran to capitulate. And I'm happy to hear both President Obama and Secretary Kerry understanding this, that capitulation is a dream, is an illusion. You will never get that. But you will get. This is important because some people believe that through pressure you can bring people to capitulate. That won't happen, not in Iran and nowhere else in the world. And I believe some people in the United States need to change that mentality. Otherwise, we will be stuck with the same problems that we've been.
Do you believe that includes the president or not?
I hope not.
Because he's spoken to how much he respects the
I hope not.
Iranian people and how much he respects the Iranian history.
Now we need to prove that. We need to prove that. Each side needs to prove. Each side. Sure. It's been, as I said, it's been compounded mutual mistrust. We believe that the mistrust of Iran is not justified. We have reason to mistrust the United States, to have less confidence that is necessary in the United States because of our history. Now, what we need to do, instead of going back and rehashing old history, is to have a serious agreement in place and implement it. We have shown in the past 18 months, and everybody has testified to that we implement what we agree. Some people are worried that Iran will implement again what it agrees to. I saw an op-ed in one of your papers saying that the biggest worry is for Iran to implement its part of the bargain. So what are people afraid of? Our people is peace an existential threat to some people? Is less tension and conflict an existential threat to some people? Are people ready to change that perspective, to change that paradigm? That's an opportunity here. Iran is an important country in the region. Iran is an important country.
No one that I know denies that.
So it is important to deal with that country, with that people who will not capitulate, but who are there to engage. Iranian people have chosen the path of engagement. It's now high time, I believe, for the United States to choose the same path. I believe we have seen some signs. We need to see that come to fruition through an agreement that is respectful of Iran's rights and dignity. And I can assure you, if you have that agreement, Iran will implement that agreement because we believe that agreement is in the interest of everybody.
I'm concerned, as you may know and expect, with some journalists that are in jail in your country, and I hope that the human rights questions can be discussed as well.
There is, we do not jail people for their opinions. The government has a plan to improve, enhance human rights in the country, as every government should. And I believe we have an obligation as a government to our own people to do that. But people who commit crimes, who violate the laws of a country, cannot hide behind being a journalist or being a political activist. People have to observe the law. I have to observe the law. When I'm asked to go to the parliament, I may not like it, but I have to go to the parliament and to respond to their question. And I believe it is important for everybody to respect the rule of law and to allow the political process, the judicial process in Iran to run its course. And I believe at the end of the day, everybody will be best served by that.
Well, I hope so, because there are reporters that I know from the Washington Post, who are going through that judicial process as we speak. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Our conversation with the Foreign Minister of Iran.